Ethan met Lila on a crisp autumn evening at a cafe near campus. She was seated in the corner, sketching in a notebook, her dark hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. Her smile, when she looked up, was radiant, magnetic. Ethan couldn't resist introducing himself, and by the end of the night, they'd exchanged numbers. Lila was unlike anyone Ethan had ever met, charming, mysterious, and just the right amount of quirky. She loved late-night drives, old black-and-white movies, and exploring abandoned places. Their relationship escalated quickly, and within weeks, they were inseparable. But there was something about Lila that Ethan couldn't quite place. She never talked about her past, dodging questions with a playful laugh or a vague answer. She didn't have social media, and when Ethan tried to take her picture, she'd always turn away. "I hate how I look in photos," she'd say with that dazzling smile. One evening, as they cuddled on Ethan's couch, Lila turned to him with an unusual request. "There's an old inn outside town," she said. "It's abandoned now, but it's beautiful. Let's go tomorrow night. Just you and me." Ethan hesitated. "An abandoned inn? At night? Sounds creepy." "That's what makes it fun," she teased, her fingers tracing circles on his arm. Her touch was cold, but Ethan dismissed it. Lila always seemed to run cold, no matter the weather. The next evening, they drove out to the inn. It loomed in the darkness, its windows shattered and walls covered in ivy. The air around the building felt heavy, as though it were holding its breath. Inside, the inn was a maze of decayed furniture and peeling wallpaper. Lila led Ethan by the hand, her laughter echoing through the empty halls. "Isn't it amazing?" she said, spinning in circles. "It's like the past is alive here." Ethan forced a laugh. "Yeah, alive and ready to haunt us." As they explored, Ethan started noticing odd things. The temperature seemed to drop drastically in certain rooms. Shadows moved in his peripheral vision, but when he turned, nothing was there. Lila, however, seemed completely at ease, even exhilarated. In one of the larger rooms, Lila stopped abruptly. "This used to be the ballroom," she said. "They'd have dances here, parties. Everyone would be so happy." "How do you know that?" Ethan asked, a chill creeping up his spine. Lila's smile faltered, and for a moment, her eyes looked far away. "I just do," she murmured. Then her grin returned, wider than ever. "Come on, let's dance." She pulled him into the center of the room. There was no music, only the faint sound of wind rattling through the broken windows. But Lila moved as if she could hear something Ethan couldn't, a haunting, lilting melody that set her body swaying. Her smile never wavered. Ethan tried to match her steps, but unease gnawed at him. "Lila, maybe we should go. This place feels wrong." Her smile faded completely, and she stopped moving. "You're not enjoying this?" she asked, her tone sharp. "It's not that," Ethan said quickly. "It's just, this place gives me the creeps." Lila tilted her head, studying him. For the first time, Ethan noticed something off about her eyes. They seemed darker than usual, almost hollow. "You don't trust me," she said softly. "After everything, you don't trust me." "Lila, that's not it." Before he could finish, the air around them grew thick, almost suffocating. The shadows in the room seemed to deepen, and the faint melody Lila had been swaying to grew louder, more distorted. Ethan stumbled back, his heart pounding. "Why don't you trust me, Ethan?" Lila whispered, stepping closer. Her voice was layered now, as if multiple people were speaking at once. Her skin grew pale, almost translucent, and her eyes sank into shadowy voids. "Lila, what's happening?" Ethan shouted, backing away. "You wanted me," she said, her smile stretching impossibly wide, splitting her cheeks. "You promised you'd stay." Ethan turned and ran, his footsteps echoing through the empty halls. The melody followed him, rising to a deafening crescendo. Behind him, Lila's laughter rang out, high, brittle, and inhuman. He burst out of the inn and into the cold night air, collapsing on the grass. When he looked back, the building stood silent and dark. There was no sign of Lila. Ethan never saw her again. He tried to move on, telling himself it had all been a nightmare. But sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, he'd hear her voice, a soft whisper in his ear. "You promised you'd stay," and in the reflection of his bedroom window, he'd catch a glimpse of her smile. Liam couldn't believe his luck when he met Chloe. She was stunning, with a soft laugh and a playful smirk that kept him hooked. They met at a crowded bar one snowy evening in December, her bright red scarf standing out like a beacon. She bought him a drink, and by the end of the night, they'd fallen into an easy rhythm of flirtation and shared stories. By their third date, Liam was smitten. Chloe, however, remained a mystery. She rarely talked about her past and brushed off personal questions with an enigmatic smile. She always carried a small mirror in her coat pocket, flipping it open to check her reflection more often than seemed normal. When Liam teased her about it one evening, she shrugged. "I just like to make sure I'm still me," she said cryptically. He laughed, thinking it was one of her quirky charms. It was on a cold January night that Chloe invited Liam to her place. Her apartment was sparse but elegant, with antique furniture and walls lined with old black and white photographs. Liam noticed something odd as he stepped inside. Every photograph featured a woman who looked remarkably like Chloe, though dressed in different styles from different eras. "Family?" Liam asked, gesturing to the pictures. Chloe's smile faltered. "Something like that," she murmured, quickly steering him toward the couch. They spent the evening drinking wine and talking until Liam excused himself to use the bathroom. The hallway leading to it was dimly lit, and as he passed a large oval mirror hanging on the wall, he froze. For a split second, he could have sworn he saw Chloe's reflection staring at him, even though she was still in the living room. Shaking it off as the wine messing with him, Liam stepped into the bathroom. The mirror above the sink was cracked, and the edges of the glass seemed faintly tarnished. As he washed his hands, he caught movement in the corner of his eye, Chloe's face, peering over his shoulder in the mirror. "Chloe," he called, spinning around. The bathroom was empty. When he returned to the living room, Chloe was sitting on the couch, her back to him. She was holding her small mirror again, but this time, she wasn't checking her reflection. Instead, she seemed to be talking to it, her voice low and urgent. "Chloe," Liam said, his voice hesitant. She snapped the mirror shut and turned to him, her smile back in place. "Everything okay?" she asked sweetly. Liam sat down beside her, trying to ignore the growing unease in his chest. "Who were you talking to?" he asked lightly. Her expression darkened for a moment before she laughed. "I talk to myself sometimes. Bad habit." Liam forced a smile, but his curiosity wouldn't let it go. "You're so secretive sometimes," he said, trying to keep his tone playful. "You can trust me, you know." Chloe's eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, he saw something behind them, something ancient and restless. "I do trust you," she said softly. "That's why I need you to promise me something." "Anything," Liam said, though the word felt heavy on his tongue. "If you ever see me in a mirror," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "don't look too long. And whatever you do, don't touch the glass." Liam chuckled nervously. "What are you talking about?" Her expression was deadly serious. "Promise me, Liam." That night, Liam stayed over. They fell asleep together, but Liam couldn't shake the strange feeling Chloe's words had left him with. He woke in the middle of the night to a faint tapping sound. At first, he thought it was coming from the window, but then he realized, it was coming from the large mirror in the hallway. Heart pounding, he crept out of bed. The apartment was cold, the air heavy with an inexplicable tension. When he reached the hallway, the tapping stopped. He stared at the mirror, half expecting to see Chloe's face staring back at him again. But the reflection showed only himself. As he turned to go back to bed, the tapping resumed, louder this time. Against his better judgment, Liam leaned closer to the mirror. His reflection remained still, but something moved behind it, a shadow, dark and shifting. Liam. The whisper was faint but unmistakable. He stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat. The reflection's lips curled into a smirk, Chloe's smirk. "Touch the glass," it whispered. Liam bolted back to the bedroom, slamming the door behind him. Chloe was sitting up in bed, her face pale. "You looked, didn't you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. Chloe stood, grabbing her mirror from the nightstand. "I told you not to look," she said, panic lacing her voice. "It's awake now." Before Liam could respond, the mirror in her hands shattered, and the lights in the room flickered out. The air grew freezing, and a low, guttural laugh echoed around them. In the darkness, Liam felt something cold brush against his face. Chloe screamed, but her voice was cut off abruptly. When the lights flickered back on, she was gone. All that remained was her small, unbroken mirror lying on the floor. When Liam picked it up, his reflection stared back at him, grinning with Chloe's smile. Danny thought he'd hit the jackpot when he met Mia. She was everything he had been searching for, smart, funny, and breathtakingly beautiful. They'd matched on a dating app a week ago, and their first few dates had been nothing short of perfect. She had a way of making him feel like the only man in the room, her deep green eyes locking onto his with an intensity that both thrilled and unnerved him. Tonight, Mia had invited him to her apartment for dinner. It was their fourth date, and Danny couldn't deny he was hoping the night would end with more than just dessert. She greeted him at the door in a sleek black dress, her long dark hair cascading over her shoulders. The apartment smelled of lavender and something earthy he couldn't quite place. "You look incredible," he said, handing her a bottle of wine. She smiled, her lips curving in a way that made his stomach flutter. "Come in," she purred, motioning him inside. The apartment was immaculate, almost too perfect, as though it had been staged for a magazine shoot. There were no personal touches, no photos, no books, not even a stray mug in the sink. Just clean surfaces and dim lighting that cast shadows in the corners of the room. Danny tried not to let it bother him. Maybe she was just really tidy. The dinner Mia prepared was delicious, and they laughed and talked late into the evening. She told him stories about her travels, her childhood, her dreams. Everything about her seemed flawless. But as the night wore on, Danny couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was the little things, how she always seemed to steer the conversation away when he asked personal questions, or how her gaze lingered just a bit too long when she thought he wasn't looking. When they moved to the couch, Mia poured them both a glass of wine. She sat close, her hand resting on his arm, her laughter light and musical. Danny felt the pull of her charm, but his unease lingered beneath the surface. "Do you believe in soulmates?" Mia asked suddenly, her tone softer now, almost reverent. Danny chuckled nervously. "I don't know. I guess I'd like to think so. What about you?" Her smile widened, but there was something predatory in it now. "I do. I think I've found mine." It was nearly midnight when Danny realized he'd had too much wine. His head felt heavy, and his vision blurred slightly around the edges. Mia leaned closer, her fingers brushing against his jaw. "Stay the night," she whispered. Danny nodded, though his instincts screamed at him to leave. She led him to her bedroom, where a single candle flickered on the nightstand. The room was as pristine as the rest of the apartment, but Danny noticed something strange, a mirror on the far wall, facing the bed. Its frame was intricately carved with symbols he didn't recognize. Mia noticed his gaze. "It's a family heirloom," she said casually. "It's said to reveal one's true self." Danny laughed weakly, the wine dulling his nerves. "Sounds mysterious." As he sat on the edge of the bed, Mia stepped behind him, her hands sliding over his shoulders. Her touch sent a shiver down his spine, not from pleasure, but from an inexplicable chill. "Do you trust me, Danny?" she whispered. "Of course," he replied, though his voice wavered. "Good," she said, her tone low and velvety. "Because tonight, I'm going to show you something special." Before he could respond, she pushed him back gently onto the bed. The candlelight flickered, and the room seemed to darken. Danny's gaze drifted to the mirror, and his breath caught in his throat. His reflection was wrong. It wasn't mimicking his movements, it was staring back at him, its expression blank and lifeless. The longer he looked, the more distorted it became, his face twisting into something grotesque, with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth. "Mia," he croaked, his voice barely audible. She leaned over him, her face now inches from his. Her green eyes glinted with something otherworldly. "You're perfect, Danny," she said, her voice a mix of sweetness and malice. "The others weren't, but you. You'll do." Danny tried to sit up, but his body felt heavy, unresponsive. The mirror's surface rippled like water, and his reflection began to move, reaching toward him, its twisted hand pressing against the glass. "Mia, please, what's happening?" he gasped. She tilted her head, her smile widening to an unnatural degree. "I needed someone worthy. Someone strong enough to take my place." The reflection's hand broke through the mirror with a deafening crack, and cold, shadowy tendrils wrapped around Danny's wrists and ankles. He screamed as the reflection pulled him closer, the room spinning around him. The last thing he saw was Mia standing by the mirror, her expression serene as she whispered, "Thank you, my love." When Danny woke, he was no longer in the apartment. He was inside the mirror, his reflection staring back at him, a perfect image of the man he used to be. He pounded on the glass, screaming, but Mia didn't look back. She simply walked away, her flawless smile never faltering. Love these stories? YouTube algorithm suggests that you would like to listen to these stories. Click on the video on the screen.